Hey, what's going on, champs? I'm Aaron Deliosa. Welcome to an Immigrant's Life podcast, my podcast about immigrants, immigration, and everything in between. Another week, another new episode of An Immigrant's Life. Thank you for joining me once again. You know where to find me on Instagram, Facebook, at An Immigrant's Life. You can listen to the podcast through YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you to all the subscribers, and if you are new here, welcome. And if you'd like to join our community, please go ahead and click that subscribe button. It's a minimal thing for you, and it means a lot to me. And if you're an Apple Podcast listener, I'd appreciate if you can drop a 5-star rating and a short and sweet review. You're helping the podcast tremendously. Now, let's talk about the episode. Our guest this week lived with a smuggler for 2 months, together with her 2 siblings when she was only 15 years old. They did that as it's the only way for them to join their mother in the United States. Through the experience and more, she learned how important and powerful telling our own personal stories can be. I think I've said enough. So without further ado, let's get into the show. Isa, dalawa, tatlo. Our guest today is a bibliophile, a blogger, and a real-life superhero because she's a teacher. Everyone, please welcome Astrid Emily Francis.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Hi, thank you for coming on. It's an honor to have you.
It's an honor to be invited and be able to have the platform and the opportunity to share my story.
Awesome. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So yes, I'm Astrid Emily Francis. I am a teacher, a high school teacher. I teach English as a second language. This is my 10th year as an ESL teacher. And before that, I was a teacher assistant for 8 years. So this is my 18th year here in the school district, the same district. And I love what I do. I love working with newcomers, students who had just come to the United States from many different places from around the world. And I do like to go around the country sharing my immigrant journey.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So we have so much to talk about, but as always, let's start from the beginning. Where were you from originally?
I was born in Guatemala. So Guatemala is a teeny tiny country, is right below Mexico. So, I mean, everybody knows where Mexico is. So it's just right below it. You can't miss it. I lived there for 15 years.
To be honest, I didn't know where Guatemala is. I knew the country, but I didn't know where it is.
But everyone can find Mexico, right? Just like,
Yeah.
you know.
So I Googled it. I said, oh, it's there. Like, it's just right there.
It's so tiny, yeah. Tiny, but a lot of population. And that's why it's such a poor country because it's, you know, they live on what they grow on land and, you know, whatever they can do. It's not a country where everyone has the opportunity to be educated and have a professional career. It's just you work really hard to at least survive.
Yeah, that's right. So you said you stayed there, you lived there till you were 15. How was your childhood in Guatemala?
You know, what I remember, I mean, I had my struggles, I had battles because, you know, we didn't own anything. So we really had to work at the market selling oranges and just making do. But at the same time, it was, I had siblings, younger siblings, and it was fun. You know, you will go to the rivers and jump in the water and you'll go around the neighborhoods, knocking on doors and bugging neighbors. You know, we used to play tag with my friends outside. And, you know, I had some very sweet memories about living in Guatemala, but, you know, there's that balance of having that childhood, but at the same time, the struggle of not having enough to eat, not having running water, having to take care of, you know, 4 younger siblings, having to manage school and having to work at the market at the same time. And I had to cook and, you know, all of that. It's just a mixture of things that I had to do for 15 years.
Mm-hmm, for sure. You said taking care of your siblings. Where's your mom and dad?
Well, I only grew up with my mother. My dad was out of the picture from since I was born. And so my mother was a single mom with 5 children. So after I was born, 4 more came along, and it was just us and her. And there was really no other family. We knew of other family who lived around, but they were never really part of the picture. So it was just really my mother and her dad, who lived about 7 years of my life, because when I was 7, he disappeared. He died. He passed away. Something
Okay.
happened to him. He
What
was the only other family that I can remember.
what do you mean disappear? Like did he
He was
leave
just gone. I
or
don't know. Yeah, he had an argument with my mother, and he just opened the door, and he looked at me and he said, I will never see you again. Those were his words. And that came true. I never saw him again after that. And he was my grandpa. I mean, he cooked for me. He made a swing for me. He was kind of like my dad, because I never really had a dad. But after that, there was really nobody else, just my mother and us taking care of each other. And well, my mom was doing the business of going to, we are about 3 hours away from the coast. So Guatemala City is about 3 hours away. So she would have to drive to the coast to buy the goods. Mostly it was oranges or cauliflowers. And she will bring him to the city. And that's where we will go to the markets or sell them from door to door and try to make businesses like that. So while she was gone, I would have to take care of the kids.
Hmm.
Or while she was at the market, I will have to take care of the kids. So it was kind of like I was used to doing that. I learned how to cook from a very young age and learned how to go to the market, do the grocery shopping, the cleaning, the washing, the doing what I had to do. Is again, like I was telling you earlier, it's part of a survival. You have
Hmm.
to make do so you can remain alive.
Oh yeah. Was there running water?
No, we did not have running water, and so we lived in many different places. So a lot
Mm.
of the places where we had it was shacks. So
Mm.
you just enough to have shelter over your head, but not running water. So that's where I would make my sisters and my brother kind of do like a game. Let's see who brings the most water to the house. So each one of them will have a bucket, and then we'll walk over to the closest factory, and you will ask them for water, and we'll bring it back to
Factory.
our house. We lived, I mean, there were so many factories, like rice factories, or I don't know, but I don't even know what it was. You could just tell it was a gated place, and there were people working in there. But they were very nice to the people around town, and they will give us water. But just for cooking and not for drinking and stuff. So that was something fun that my sisters and my brother do remember. How we were fetching water back and forth.
That's funny. I had that growing up too, but it wasn't a game. I hated it. Until now I hate it.
Well, you know what? After so many times that we had to do it, yes, it becomes dreadful. But there were little kids, and the more kids we had holding water, the less trips I had to do. So you had to kind
Exactly.
of make it fun so they could help. But I mean, we played, we cooked together, we told stories, we helped each other with schoolwork. I mean, it wasn't like I was not living in a place where I suffer like bombs, and
Hmm.
there was no like gangs back then like today. I can't even go visit my country because I know there around the corner there could be a gangs and shootings or whatever else. I didn't have to fear any of that.
Hmm.
I would even go myself to those trips that my mother would do to go pick up oranges and come by myself, because it was kind of safe back
Hmm.
then. I mean, we're talking 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So it was fun while we were there for sure. But at the same time, fun with, you're combining that with, you never went to the doctor, you never went to the dentist, that didn't have any money for that. It was a very poor kind of life.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you mentioned about dentists because I went to my dentist the other day and I said, I grew up in the Philippines and I think I went maybe
Yeah.
once. I
Yeah.
don't
What?
even remember.
It's pitiful. But at the same time, we needed it, because when I came here to the US and I went to the dentist and the doctor, they wonder, why have I not gone before? And my mouth was so bad that they had months and months of work to do because
Mm.
of that. So, I mean, yeah, it's
So you mentioned you live in the U.S. now. How did you get to the U.S.? Who came first?
well, my mother came first,
Mm.
and right at the when I was around 13 years old, my mother made the decision to come here to the U.S. We got to the point where things were getting very hard. She couldn't even sell those oranges that she wanted to sell, and just we didn't have enough food for all of us, just for the little kids, and she just heard of the opportunity for her to come here to the US and work and make some money, and really she didn't know how to clean, how to do work. She has always had her own business, so she
Mm.
didn't know what it was to take orders from anybody. So she came here to the US. Of course, she came undocumented with false documentation, and when she left us back home, we were kind of all scattered out. She found different people for us to stay. So the plan was not for me to stay with the kids. We were all scattered out. But, we started experiencing like physical and mental abuses in the places where we were staying, not just me, but my little sister and my little
Hmm.
brother. And we couldn't take that.
Yeah.
Not only we didn't have my mother, but on top of that, we were being abused for these people that were receiving money from the US. No. So that's when a very friendly neighbor offered his backyard, and we built a shack. And that's where my sisters and my brother and I lived, under the guardian of this person who decided to take
That's a nice
ownership.
person.
Yeah, he was very nice, but at the same time, he was very interested in the money that my mother
Oh
was
boy.
sending. He ended up stealing a lot of the money, and it just, he kept lying to my mother about what he was buying, and he really wasn't buying. I mean, so yes,
Oh,
it was
okay.
nice that he gave us the place to stay, but he wasn't very honest when it came to the money.
So he wasn't really nice.
Yeah, no, no, no. So that's when 2 years later, that's really all we could take. 2 years of this nonsense of money transfers and us being without my mother. And, my little brother was only 3 years old. He, at that early age, he doesn't know what's happening. He could barely remember my mom when she left. So he started calling me mom because I
Mm.
was changing his diapers, I was feeding him, and I couldn't just tell him not to call me mom. He didn't
Yeah.
have anybody else. So I was mom, and so we started noticing that it was time for my mother to come back. So the plan was really all the time for her to go back to Guatemala and use the money that she had saved to buy us a house. I mean,
Mm.
once you have shelter, when you own your own shelter, it's much easier to live in our countries because you're not paying for a place to live. You're just making money for food and clothing, whatever else.
Hmm.
But and then someone just kind of put a bug in her ear. Why don't you bring the kids to the United States instead of you going back? And of course, at first, it was kind of a dumb thought because we didn't have money. We didn't have the financial means to show to immigration that we were coming here in pleasure vacations. We just didn't have that. And so it was cheap, or not cheaper, but much more convenient to pay a smuggler.
Mm.
And so my mother decided to hire a smuggler, and
What do you mean smuggler?
a smuggler is a person who receives an amount of money in order to cross you over borders and bring you here
Oh.
undocumented. So they'll find either false documentation, or they cross you over the river, or through deserts or whatever, but they bring you
How do
across
you
the
find a
country.
smuggler?
I don't know how you find one. That's not a question I can answer you, but she came out with the opportunity. Someone
Is
had
that the
offered it
way
to her.
she came to the U.S. as well, or
Yes, she did.
okay?
She did. So she was given a fake passport, so she was able to get on a plane and show the passport. I guess it was very well made that she was able to walk through immigration with no problem.
Mm.
But she was here in the United States working undocumented because she didn't have the right paperwork for her to
Mm.
work.
Yeah.
So my little brother and my little sister's dad, he found out of course, he had to find out because my mother needed his permission to take
Oh.
the kids out of the country.
Wait,
So
sorry
when
for cutting you off. Where was this guy?
Mom knew where he was, but he was just never part of the family, part of the picture. I mean, she couldn't take the kids out of the country. She couldn't even take me out of the country without getting my father's permission. So
Oh,
she
okay.
had to find our fathers because we were all different dads. She had to find our father's permission for us to leave the country. Otherwise, it would have been considered, something wrong.
Kidnapping.
She would have gotten in trouble. Yeah, but she had all of their permissions. And when he found out that the kids were going to travel with a smuggler, he didn't like that idea.
Yeah, no one likes that idea.
Well, we didn't either, but we didn't have a
Pretty
choice.
sure.
Yeah, we didn't have a choice, really. That was really the only opportunity that many immigrants have to use as means to come to the U.S. because they can't just go to immigration and ask for a visa. They don't have that. You have to prove that you have money. You have to prove that you have, means and assets. And if they don't have that, how are they going to be granted permission? They won't. And so their dad brought them. He was able to get the paperwork for the kids, and in a matter of days, the kids were here, blink of an eye.
So this guy is in Guatemala,
Yeah.
and then he just said, you know what, guys, I'm bringing it to U.S.
He had the means, he has the financial means to do that and more, but he was only going to do it for his two children with common sense. Those were his kids. He was not responsible for all five of us. So it was just for me and my two younger sisters that we had to endure the journey of the traveling with the smuggler. So there was fear, of course, because you don't know the person who's going to come and pick you up. You just know some random person is going to come and pick you up and you're just going to go with them, and at the same time, you are placing your hope on these people who maybe I hope they know what they're doing and they are going to keep up with our promises. And so I grabbed my little sister's hand, and we just get in the vehicle with just our essentials. Each one of us had a little backpack and whatever we could fit in there.
Okay. Just slow it down because I'm really interested in this part of your story because how it works. So your mom, I guess, sent you a letter back then, or was there a phone to tell you?
Yes, there were phones, but it was just too expensive. So we used to communicate through letters. So of course there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, there was nothing for us to talk. And whenever we did talk about serious decisions like these, then we would pay to talk to her over the phone. So we had someone at church who had a phone in their home, and for a good amount of money, of course, they would let us use their phone, but it was just only on situations like a letter cannot wait, we have to talk. So that conversation occurred, of course, through phone. But that's how we talked about it.
So she called you up and say, hey, Astrid, this is what's going to go down. There'll be a day. This guy's going to come and take you. Did you know the day or?
That's it. Yeah, of course. Yeah, we knew the date. We had to be prepared. We just knew that the plan was going to be to go with them, and eventually we're going to ride a plane. So it wasn't going to be like today, like people cross over deserts and cross over the river. We knew we weren't going to do that. My mom had paid a good amount of money for them to create the fake passport enough to go in a plane, just the way she had done it. And
So this guy came. It was a single guy. There's only one person.
No, it was the mediator. So there's a person, I guess, who is in charge of making these connections. So not the actual smuggler. The actual smuggler, it's at home, counting money, while the mediator is the person who does all the arrangements.
Okay.
And at least that's the way it worked for us. So this person was on the phone with mom, made the decision, made the connections, received the money to pay the smuggler. And then she was the one who picked us up. And
Oh, it's a woman.
is a woman, and
Okay.
she was to take us to the smuggler's home. So it was a
Mm.
woman who picked us up, and then she drove us to, I think we spent on her house maybe 2-3 days. And
Okay.
then from there, we went over to the smuggler where the process began to make the passport, take the pictures, and then the waiting began because
How were
we
you
never,
feeling at that moment?
we were really scared. I mean, I'm not going to deny it. We were really scared because they always told us to keep our things in the bag because we would have to go to another hotel or another house or another place. So we were always on the go,
Oh,
and
yeah.
there was
Is it
always
like any
other
moment?
people.
Any moment you're
Yeah,
moving?
and not really. That we just, and yeah, it could be like today you're sleeping here, tomorrow you're gonna sleep somewhere else. So we always had to keep our bags
Mm.
packed up, and there were always other people. I mean, I remember we were picked up in November. December came, Christmas came around, and we celebrated Christmas with all the people who had also paid. So we were all making, tamales and a fiesta, and we were celebrating Christmas, everybody waiting for the day that
Okay.
tomorrow, would be the day that you would go. So we only had each other to kind of hope and talk and have you heard anything? When are you leaving? Where are you coming from? You would make friends like that. And it was just a matter of holding hands every night and just hoping that you're going to go to sleep and hopefully tomorrow you're going to see the daylight.
You're strong. You're strong.
There's
Man.
really no other option. You either that or you stay behind and keep suffering in poverty.
Mhm.
That the opportunities in the US are much, much better. So you
Mhm.
kind of give everything you have. And hope is really a lot more than you think, than strength. So maybe I wasn't that strong as you think. There were many nights where I cried, where I wanted to call my mom and say, never mind, I'm just going to stay here. But I couldn't do that. She couldn't talk. She couldn't call us. We couldn't call her. So for 2 months, she knew nothing. She knew nothing about us. Once we were picked up that November 1993, she lost us. She had no
For
idea
two
what.
months,
For 2 months, she
no
heard
connection.
nothing, no connection. We couldn't call her because we couldn't tell her where we were. Those were
Mm.
places that was holding people who were trying to travel
Yeah.
undocumented. So you can't really call and say, "Hey, I'm in so and so's house." So for 2 months, it was very, very hard not to
Jesus.
tell her. And there was a lot of crying, there was a lot of praying, there was a lot of hoping, and until finally we spent a few days in Mexico City, and that's
Mm.
where they finally made the decision that we're
Okay.
going to go from Mexico City to the US.
Did you take the plane to Mexico?
No, we rode trains, buses. We made it through Mexico all the way to Mexico City using different transportations. I remember even horses. No kidding. There were some towns that we went by and we had to ride horses. So, transportation was different all throughout until we made it to Mexico City. From Mexico City is where we were to take the plane to the US.
Oh, was there the same person taking care of you the whole time, or different people?
No, the same person. The same
Oh,
person. And this is the person I don't know. Back then it looked like that my sisters and I kind of decided that it was the smuggler's wife, the person who was taking us from place to place.
mm.
Now, before we got on a plane with the actual smuggler, they
Mm.
took us to his house to meet him, and we had to practice. You're going to call him dad. This is your dad. If they ask you, you are this age. They had cut my hair like really short to make me look like I think 12 years old. And we had to practice, that I was his daughter and we were just coming here to visit. And, so we met him before that morning that we got on the plane. So at least we knew what he looked like.
So there was no practice.
No. Yeah.
Excuse my French, but I'll be shitting bricks.
Yeah. It's hard. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Yeah.
So the smuggler says, "Hey, let's go. We're gonna be on the plane. We're gonna meet mom. Let's go now."
Yeah. That's when she gets the phone call. So the night that we were told that was January. It was January 23rd when we arrived. So on the 22nd, we get told tomorrow you put on your best dress, you get on a plane, and that's when my mother gets the phone call. Tomorrow at this and that time, they're going to be dropped off at the airport. So someone needs to be there to get them. So that's finally when she heard from us, after 2 months.
Speaking of the best dress, is it the picture that you have it on your blog when you had like these beautiful jackets? Is
Yes,
that the
yes.
day?
So we all of us bought whatever outfit we want to wear. Well, my sisters bought some princess dress, they call it, and I had this long skirt that I have found. I thought it was really pretty. But we all had matching
I love those
jackets, Mexican
jackets.
jackets. We were just fascinated with those jackets. We were loving the culture, loving the Mexican people. And we were just about, enjoying the different environment of the different country because, we were from Guatemala. Mexico's really beautiful and it's different. And, the food was different and the climate was different. So we took advantage of those jackets and we was like, we're going to bring those to the US.
They still have them?
No, not at all.
Ah,
I wish I had.
they're beautiful. So anyway, so you got on the plane. First of all, how did you feel getting on the plane? Were you afraid?
We were excited, finally, we were getting on a plane and we were going to be reunited with my mother, who we knew was going to be at the airport waiting on us. And, or if it wasn't her, somebody that she was going to send to pick us up.
Some smuggler.
Yeah. But at the same time, we were scared because we looked at those passports and we knew that, that wasn't us. It was different names and the picture was us. Like they made us look so different, but the information was different. And
do you remember your name?
Scared. No.
You don't?
I should, I don't think they gave us those passport bags once we got busted because we get busted at the airport.
Oh, you did? Oh my God.
So the documentation must have been done so poorly that as soon as we showed our passports to the immigration agent, they looked at us and you could just tell that they knew, this is not working for them. And, I remember shaking. I mean, my hand was shaking because I knew that documentation was false. I knew that we were doing something wrong. You know what's right and what's wrong. And we really knew that we didn't have another choice. And so they pulled us over into an immigration room, and that's when the questions began through a translator. What are you doing here? Who is really this guy? What do you want here? You need to go back to your country. And, just accusations like that. And they started taking our fingerprints, and we knew it was over when we turned around and we see the smuggler being dragged out with handcuffs. Even his feet were handcuffed, that he couldn't even walk. And we were like, oh crap, we are doomed. Like we knew we were done. And we started crying, please don't send us back. I mean, I'm just 15. My sisters are young. We were not lying when we said there was nobody else in Guatemala for us. It's just us. We need to be here with my mother. Oh, then go get your mother, or give me your mom's number so she can go with you. And of course, we weren't going to do that. I wasn't going to tell them where my mom was. She was undocumented. They would have gone and picked her up.
But you knew her number?
I don't remember. I don't think I did, because otherwise I probably would have called her when we were out and about. Yeah. I don't think I had her number. It was always that mediator, that person who we were living, in his shack, that person who would making those phone calls. So I don't think I ever had her any documentation. Nothing. Yeah.
Because you would have gave that number, I'm pretty sure.
I probably would have, because I was scared. I wanted my mother. We were all crying. I mean, my sisters were crying. And, especially when they started doing the fingerprints and the pictures and the word deportation, and we're going back. And what are we going to do? We had already told the guy that they can tear the shack down because we were gone. We had been gone for 2 months. For all I know, that shack wasn't there anymore, Yeah. And so it was an all-day thing. We arrived early morning on that 23rd. It was already nighttime by the time two ladies walk in that same room and yelling and talking at the immigration agents. Well, those two ladies ended up being, one was my grandmother, so my mother's mom. She lives here in the United States. She's an American citizen, and her sister. So both of them were there. They brought documentation to prove that she was my grandmother and that she was financially capable to claim us. And she made herself responsible and signed documentation to be able to keep us here in the United States. So that's how I
Wow.
was able to stay here documented. You know, my green card was issued, my work
Whoa.
permit was issued. So everything was done because of that. But she had never, I mean, she had never been, we knew about her, but she had never been like part of my family per se. We knew she was here. We knew she lived here with other families. We just never thought that she was going to do what she did,
That's
which
nice.
is one of the greatest things that she has done for us. And we were all able to obtain our documentation and be able to go to school, be able to live a peaceful life, you know.
They
And
let you in? Is that okay? Like before? That's amazing.
25 years ago, I mean, we're talking 25 years ago, yes. If that would have happened today, no, that would have never been allowed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these two angels came, saved you, and brought you. Where are you guys staying after that? Like, is there an
Oh, I mean, of
apartment?
course, yeah, because she had made herself responsible for us, we had to stay in her house. So she has a house in New York City, and she gave us her basement, and you know, it's big enough for us to live there. And
Hey, you live in a shack.
yeah, that basement was a mansion, no kidding.
Palacio.
Yes. So we went and met with mom. We cried, we reunited, we talked, and
Oh,
we were taken straight to that basement, and that's where my life began here in the United States.
man, I cannot imagine how your mom felt and you felt that night.
Yeah, yeah, it was unbelievable. You know, my little brother and my sister had already been here. They celebrated Christmas here with her, so they were
Bastards!
already.
They're having
I
fun
know
over there.
they had already been here, and you know, it was nice to see that they had already caught up with
Yeah,
emotions
they
and
were just.
stuff. They were already dressed in, you know, American outfits and stuff. I mean, they were already acculturated in a matter of months. But it was just wonderful that we were finally, you know, together and being able to talk. And, you know, the job of taking care of the siblings continued because my mother is a single mother, you know, and she has to work. She has to be out of the house for several hours. And it was my job to continue taking care of the siblings here, but it was different. You know, now we had her here with us, and even though she was working 16, 17 hours, we knew she was going to come home. And
Yeah.
it was just that different. Uh-huh.
I don't know if you felt this way, but I remember when I landed in Canada, I instantly knew and I felt that life is better.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
No kidding.
like like big weight is just lifted off. I'm like, I think I'm okay now. I think I can
Yeah.
breathe now.
Yes. Yes.
You know. So now that you have arrived in the land of milk and honey, as they say, how did you feel then, and what were your expectations?
I mean, I had always wanted to go to school. I mean, I knew that I wanted to be a teacher ever since I was young. So I knew that going to school and getting a high school diploma was going to be an opportunity to go to college. I mean, I knew that college is a career. I wanted to have a profession. I wanted to have a career. I always wanted to have that. I just knew that the opportunities were limited living in Guatemala, but the aspirations were always there. It's just finally I was in a country where these dreams could be possible, you know? So the last year that I completed in Guatemala was the 6th grade. So from the 6th grade in Guatemala, I was enrolled here in high school in the 9th grade. So I kind of missed 6 years of schooling because I couldn't go to school every day. So I would have been, you know, higher than a 6th
Because
grade,
you have
but
to take care of the girls.
I missed, yeah, a lot of years, you know, teachers wouldn't pass me because I was not attending enough or I wasn't doing the assignments or whatever. So I was held several times, and, you know, sixth grade was the most I accomplished. But I was very smart. I mean, I knew how to do business. I knew how to do public speaking. I have done that. I was so responsible, like taking care of my brothers and sisters. I was responsible taking, holding a household together. I mean, that in itself are all the skills that you need to be successful in a school, even if you don't speak the language. I didn't speak English. English is a luxury in our countries for those who go to private school. I barely made it to public school, nonetheless. So, okay, it was really the only word I knew. And I started, facing very difficult circumstances at school because of language, because of culture, because of, so many things. They knew that it was a low socioeconomic status, and ESL just was such a low stigma that they give you, that you start feeling subconscious, and you start feeling bad, and you start feeling like you're dumb, and all the richness and the glorious that you feel like when you come here kind of fades away when they make you feel like that in schools.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine like learning the language and then learning, I don't know, history and other things in the other language too.
It's very hard. Yeah, it's very hard. Absolutely.
And I listened to your podcast, by the way.
Oh,
Amazing podcast.
hey, thank you.
Great job. Great job. And you mentioned that you failed in high school. Can you tell the story?
Yeah. So after noticing that I was being made fun of, or I was not participating in class because I didn't speak English, I started trying really hard to make sure that I learned the language. I mean, if that's what it takes for me to do good in school and to graduate, is to learn the language so I can get my credits. And I started doing that. I mean, I worked my butt off that. I remember it was just countless hours of just learning and translating everything. And so it was 3 a.m. My mother's my witness. I was in a kitchen table with different dictionaries and thesaurus and translating everything I had copied from the teacher's board so I can understand what was happening. And then I will write in Spanish my responses and then translate it to English so I can submit it to the teacher. There was no Google. Golly, I tell my students today, if you would only lived 20 years ago, this Google thing with one fingertip that translates everything is glorious. No, with me, it was not that. And I did it. In about a year and a half, I acquired enough language to place out of the English program. So I started taking classes, like math and sciences and, histories. And I was understanding the content. I was acquiring the credits for graduation. I was ready. I mean, they took my picture with cap and gown, 42 credits. I was going to graduate. I was done.
You're feeling good.
Yeah, I was really, I consider myself real smart. I thought I did really good. If for you to get the credits, that means you passed the class. And for you to pass the class is because you have to do the work. So obviously I was doing something right. And then at the end of the year, every state administers an end of year Regents exam. It's kind of like a summary of everything you have learned in that content. So I passed, the reading and the writing and everything else, except the American history. Obviously, I have not understood enough, I guess, when I took the classes that I didn't pass the test. So I took it in English, I took it in Spanish, and I did not pass the test. And without being able to pass this test, it didn't matter how many credits I had, they were not going to give me my diploma.
One subject.
So, one subject. It wasn't even the class I failed, it was the test. And so I didn't get kicked out of school, but I was just told, you already have all of your credits. Just come back next year to take the test. And if you pass, we'll give you the diploma. I'm like, what? So, I didn't need to be in school anymore. I had passed everything. But I didn't have the strength to go back to just take the test. I was very discouraged. I feel like the school system failed me because as a newcomer, as an immigrant who had given it all, I had risked my own personal, my language, my heritage, my culture. I had put all of that on hold to acculturate, to become who they wanted me to become, that successful student that schools aspire to have.
Yeah.
I've done that. But just because of one test, I was just receiving a tap on the shoulder. And of course, and I was very discouraged. I was very deflated. I didn't want to do anything else. I was sad. I got into a depression, and I didn't have the confidence to look for other jobs. I had already started working a part-time at a supermarket. So I just asked for a full-time, and I began working as a cashier because really that's all I could do, just scanning groceries without having to. I mean,
Did you talk to your mom about it though?
not really. I think back then she only thought, okay, you don't have any classes anymore. You're done. I don't know. I just feel like she wasn't in the mind to understand what was happening. It wasn't until my little sister's high school graduation that she realized what it takes to graduate, how many credits you need. It took back 3 of us to go through high school for her to finally realize. And I mean, and I don't blame her. You have this single parent who has to work countless hours to bring bread to the table for 5 children. And I'm not, who am I to say you should have, Mom? Because she did what she had to do for me. And my job was to take care of my studies. And that's what I tell a lot of my students today. If your parents are busy working, they're taking care of the children, they're taking care of the household, you are old enough to embrace your education and make sure you do it for them. That you find out your credits, that you find out what it takes to graduate so you can honor the sacrifices that your parents are doing for you.
Yeah, you're correct. So you were scanning groceries. There's no plan, just to scan groceries for the rest of your life kind of deal?
For the rest of my life, because I was getting good at it. I was getting good. I knew all the supermarket language. I knew all the groceries. I knew everything related to grocery stores. So I felt like I was where I belong. But at the same time, when you have a burning sensation in your gut about making a difference, and when you know, and when you begin to understand and embrace your journey and your experiences as to where you are and what it took to get there, that's when you start realizing that there's more. So it took a lot for me to be able to understand that what I had experienced in Guatemala, what I had experienced with the smuggler, what I had experienced in school, all of that was important. And I was capable for more. So that's when I started thinking about working in a school system. And really all I wanted to do was say, I work at the school, but I apply as a cleaning crew. I was going to start cleaning.
Was this in New York or Carolina?
No, I moved here to the Carolinas because after I dropped out of school, I get pregnant. So I come here to the Carolinas trying to find a new way of living, try to make it better for my son. And so I moved here. This is where I find out about, if you want a better job, you have to have a high school diploma. So that's when I found out about the GED. So here in the United States, there's a equivalence. I mean, it's not the same, but it's a document that allows you to go to college, at least a community college. So nobody ever told me that in New York. Otherwise, I probably would have done it, years before. So here in the Carolinas is where somebody mentioned that, and I go and I get my GED. And with that GED, I had a little more confidence to apply at the school system. I figured, well, if they hire me for cleaning or if they hire me for, serving food, I'll be good. That's all I need. Just get into the school. But little did I know that a principal was looking at my application and he wanted to interview me for a teacher's assistant. He had a first grade teacher who needed an assistant, and he wanted me to come in for an interview. Of course, I started laughing. My English, of course, I had only been here in the U.S. 5 years. So it wasn't like very strong. And so the principal leaves the message that he wants to interview me for teacher assistant, and I play that message, I'm not kidding you, like 20 times. Is he saying teacher like a teacher assistant, like helping a teacher, like working in a class? Like, so I wait for my husband. I had already met my husband, and I wait for my husband to come home, and he's American. Of course, he's not going to have trouble understanding this message. I said, listen to this person. Is he saying what I'm thinking he's saying? And he goes, yeah. It's an interview for teachers. I was like, okay, so I'm not going crazy. I'm not misunderstanding. Okay. So, I showed up to the interview, but with very little hope, because
Why?
I had no background. I was nothing. I was a loser. I was someone who had accomplished nothing. I had someone who had very little English. I had someone who didn't finish high school. I had someone who was, by the time I applied, I had already had my baby. I was like, I have a baby. I just married, and I felt like I didn't have anything to give.
Why me?
And that's what I asked. I said, just up front, just so you know. And then the teacher who needed the assistant looks at me and she says, Emily, tell me your story. My story? I mean, my story begins 1978 in Guatemala. And, do you want to hear that? I got a story for you. And I begin telling him the exact same thing that I share with you. And I mean, their mouths just open and they're like, what? You did what? I'm like, yeah. What's wrong with that? I mean, to me, that's just my life. But they made me realize the value on that journey. I had not experienced until that moment how powerful my story is, how amazing it is for others to hear that. So they were impacted just by hearing my story. They hire me that you are the person who I need to be working for me. And I'm like, okay. And I started working, with 7-year-old kids, and she is the one who took me under her wing, and she helped me become the teacher. So I worked with her for 8 years in that classroom.
Okay. Like I said, I read your blog a little bit. Can you tell the broken cash story? I love the story.
The reason why she hired me?
Yes, I love the story.
Definitely the reason she hired me is because she loved my story. But there was somebody else who had interviewed, and she had a lot of credentials. So Angie was deciding, who do I want? Like, do I want Emily with this wonderful story, or do I want this person who has all these credentials as a teacher? So she was in the process of deciding. She had the weekend to decide. And, I was still working. I was a cashier, but it was a place called Bass Pro Shops, and they sell fishing lures and boat accessories. And her husband needed an accessory. And so they both go to Bass Pro Shops. Back then, of course, I wasn't just a regular cashier. I was in charge of cashiers. So they page me on the radio and they say, Emily, we need help because my register just got stuck. And so here am I coming to help and rescue this cashier whose register was stuck. And when I turn around, the customer who was waiting at that stuck register was Angie, the teacher who had interviewed me. And we looked at each other. Oh my God, hi, how are you? And the husband's like, hello, register.
It's the register, man.
We forgot about the register. And she was just so happy to see me. I was happy to see her because we had shared a moment, when we talked about my story. It was a very special moment. And I guess she walked out of there and she just picked up the phone and called the principal and say, that's it. Emily Francis it is. And that's how my journey started in the educational system.
I love the story. I love it.
Divine intervention.
Yeah, it's like God's like, what's up? I'm going to hook you up.
No kidding. He pulls strings for me a lot.
That's awesome. So how was your experience being an assistant teacher?
Well, with her, it was wonderful because she was very trustful. She will be like, okay, do whatever you want to do, So I will grab kids, especially I will gravitate toward kids who have struggles reading,
Mm.
kids who didn't know how to read or write. So I just felt like I was compelled to help them. And little did I know that later that was the profession that I would choose, is not just to be a teacher, but a teacher of struggling learners and language learners. So that room, her classroom, was definitely a place for me to practice and become the best that I could become, because I came out of her classroom with a lot of good things under my wing.
And while you were being assistant teacher, you were going to school to be a teacher as well?
Yes, it took me several years. So, as a teacher assistant, I was required to be a bus driver. So from five, yes. So from 5:30 in the morning to 8, I would drive a bus. Like I would pick up the kids, take them to school. From 8 to 3, I was a teacher assistant. From 3:30 to 5, I was a bus driver taking the kids back home. And I will meet my mom halfway in the highway to give her my son, because he was going to school with me. She will take my son and I will run on to the community college. So it took me
Wow.
3 years to get my associate's degree. It took me 4 years to get my bachelor's and 2 more to get my master's. So it took me really 12 years to finish my career because I was working at the same time.
You're a beast. Oh my God. Three
Everything is
years like
possible.
that?
Everything is possible for sure.
Well, I don't know about that. For you, yes, you're an amazing person.
Oh my goodness.
I'll be like, enough of this. I'm just gonna do something else over there.
No, I knew within my gut that I was going to be a really good teacher. Like
Yeah.
I knew, I knew that I had a desire to make a difference, and
Mm.
it didn't matter what was going to take. Like I almost dropped out of college
Mm.
because there was a test that I didn't pass. I took it 6 times. So the university has a test called Praxis,
Okay.
and it's kind of like a summary of the entire high school. So you take this test, and this test will admit the student to the Department of Education to take the courses to be the teacher. Well, I took it 6 times and I never passed. So I almost really dropped out of college. But I found another way around it through a guidance counselor who really knew what he was doing, and he helped me out. And he's the one who really helped me make the decision to become an ESL teacher, because I
Mm.
wanted to be an elementary school teacher, but he's the one that guided me to realizing that I could be a teacher who helps students who are struggling with the same thing that I did. Because even in college, I was struggling with my English. And, academic English is very different from communication English.
Mm.
And so my levels were not yet there to be able to be as proficient as I should have been in college. And it was very hard.
Yeah. And then you graduated, you became a teacher,
Yeah.
and what does room 167 in Irvin Elementary School means to you?
Oh, my very first room. So I get hired, of course, it was the same district that I started as a teacher assistant. And, the principal who hired me walks in room 167 and he says, Miss Francis, this is your classroom. You know, it for me, it wasn't like any other classroom. It was Mrs. Francis's classroom.
Hmm.
It was the place where I knew I was going to pour my heart and my soul in, and I promised it. I stood in the middle of the room. I even asked the principal to leave me alone a few minutes, and I wanted to soak it in. So I looked around, and the walls were bare, and I could imagine me working with kids and putting things on the wall, and it was just an opportunity that I had been working for a long time.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah,
I love that. I think we're getting there, but I just want to talk one more topic. Is that okay?
sure.
Yeah. About your podcast. I went deep dive on that thing. I love it. I love how emotional you were. You almost got me crying.
No way. Ben, I
Almost.
failed. You should have been
Almost.
crying.
No, I'm a man. I have to push it down, you know?
Oh, that's awesome. I was compelled to, first, I was compelled to write it. And really, I wasn't going to make it public because even though I had realized that my story had potential, that my story was important to share, when you experience things like that family separation and everything that I experienced, you relive all of those experiences. And some of them are they hurt, and writing it or telling it, it's hard. So I wrote it just for the heck of it. It just felt compelled to type it in, and I shared it with one of my friends, an author friend. She read it and she goes, Emily, make this public. Like right now, you need to share this right now. She made her students read it. The students were crying. The students were sending me videos. Oh my gosh, I love your story. It's just like mine. And it just blew from there. Like everybody was wanting to hear my story. And I started sharing it wide and in different places and different platforms. And then I thought, podcast is something I haven't done. I make my students work with the listening skills to develop English. And I'm always looking for podcasts that can help my students be able to hear something and understand. And so I was like, let me just get out of my comfort zone a little bit and create a podcast. So I started it. I kind of put it on hold, but at least I got the foundation there, which is my journey. Eventually, I'm going to start adding students' stories. So that's my goal, to add students' stories to my podcast.
Yeah. For everyone that's listening, you got to check it out. It's amazing. It's like an audiobook. It should be an audiobook, to be honest.
Oh, never thought about that.
You didn't think of that?
A great idea.
I swear to God, when I was listening, like, this needs to be an audiobook.
Well, I'm writing a book, so maybe my book
sweet.
turns into audio, so we'll see.
I can't wait to read that or listen to it.
Thank you.
That's amazing. But do you want to mention the name of the podcast?
Oh, my goodness. Hang on, because I titled it, of course, you had to.
I can say it. I remember the name.
Yeah, go for it.
It's Our Stories Matter.
Oh, look at that. It's like a year ago that I made it. You know it more than I do. Okay.
Well, I told you, I listened to it twice. I love it.
Oh my gosh. I'm glad you do. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you for recording it. It's just, I love it. The way you did it, it's like, man, this needs to be an audiobook.
Oh, nice. Thank you so much.
But yeah, we're there. But before we close out, do you have any last remarks or any advice?
Well, just like you said in the podcast name, stories matter. And I think that telling our stories not only helps us as individuals who had experienced, different journeys, but it also impacts others. So if you're listening and you think, oh, my story is just a story, just think of your story more so as a journey, is a combination of experiences that make you who you are. So I used to think of my story as something important until I started realizing that my journey and those experiences make me who I am. And so when we learn to see our journeys that way, we can see the value in sharing it to others.
Wise word from a wise woman. Astrid, thank you so much for coming, and I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye. Again, Astrid, thank you for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it. Thank you, listeners, for listening. This is Aaron Deliosa for An Immigrant's Life. I'll see you guys later.